Hello guys, it is Gated Theories here, and today we are back talking about the show Riverdale. Now, since the very beginning of the show, in fact, since the very first line of this show, there's always been the character Jughead basically telling the audience what is been happening in Riverdale so far. So, what is happening now, what might going to happen, and what has happened in the past. You know, he's sort of like the narrator of the entire show. And that is what we're going to be discussing today, because have you ever wondered why on earth Jughead seems to be like narrating the entire Riverdale show and he seems to be writing it all up on his computer? So today we've got an idea about maybe the reason why he does this is because secretly all of Riverdale is just what he imagines might have happened. Maybe he's writing a book about everything about Riverdale and that the show isn't actually happening, it's just like a figment of Jughead's imagination. But today we're going to explore that lots further, and I'll explain what I'm meaning later on in the video. But before we go any further, if you haven't already, make sure you've clicked that red subscribe button down below and have your notifications turned on. And yeah, enjoy the video. Now, this whole idea of the entire show being inside Jughead's head has sort of been around since the beginning. When we all started watching Riverdale, I'm pretty sure at one point you might have had a little thought about, oh, why is he writing all of his life story up? It's not a diary. Is he writing for a future book or not? Or maybe it is just all in his head. You might have had these sort of ideas. Now, Riverdale is quite a complicated show, so there's so many theories on all the characters and what might happen, but there's always been one theory that's stuck since the first ever line said in the TV show. And this is the idea that the entirety of Riverdale is just a figment of Jughead's imagination, and that all the books and monologues he writes in the show is because in real life he is writing a fictional book, and that is Riverdale. Jughead, being the writer he is, writes most of all the characters' journeys throughout the TV show. Most episodes start or end with a monologue from what he's been writing, making most people think that maybe this isn't just a story he's writing, but that he's addressing the reader in a book, just like how he's talking to the audience while we're watching Riverdale. It's likely to assume that Jughead is the narrator of this book, and that the real Jughead in real life is pretending to be this person. So, if all of Riverdale is just a book written by Jughead in real life, then why did he write it? Now, the book might be completely fictional and the real Jughead is just making it up, or it could be the real Jughead writing about his past, so it kind of gets a bit complicated. Now, you might be thinking this is just a load of rubbish, but in fact, in some of the most recent episodes we've had of Riverdale, there's been lots of evidence suggesting that this could be all true. We can even go back straight to the beginning of the show and look at the first few lines that are, "This story is about a town, a small town, and the people who live in the town and work there and fall in love there, get married there, have children there, and yes, even die there. From a distance, or from the window of a train rushing by, it presents itself like so many other small towns all over the world, safe, decent, innocent. But that's only how people want it to be, or think it is because they're young and don't know any better, or they're old and they don't want to know any better. At a certain point, though, you look close enough, and you start seeing the shadows underneath the town, and sometimes the shadows take over, and you're living in this place you don't recognize anymore, and you're feeling a lot of things, but safe isn't one of them. The name of this town is Riverdale, and our story begins, I guess, with what the Blossom twins did this summer." Now, if that doesn't sound like the intro of a story, like a actual book, then I don't know what it is. It's even the title of this page that Jughead has open on his laptop is called Riverdale, and it sounds almost like the prologue of a book that is just about to introduce its first chapter. It's just getting the setting. It's just getting the setting and the scene laid out in this prologue, and then they're about to write the actual chapter. And notice how it keeps on reminding us and saying, our story, our this, our that. It's basically Jughead saying, this is my personal story here, and this is me presenting it out to you guys. And it sounds like it is in a book. Now, like I was saying before, we can go on two different ways here. We can either have the Jughead inside of the show, writing this book like he has been doing throughout the entire show, and then after the series is finished, he publishes the book. Or we have a Jughead in real life who is thinking of this show fictionally And the characters Betty, Archie, Veronica, all of them don't actually exist. They're just fictional characters in a book. Now, that's what most people seem to think. They seem to think this is all just in Jughead's imagination, and that in fact Betty, Veronica, Archie are all just some fictional characters that Jughead has made up in his mind and is writing them down on paper. Now, people may begin to think about this because you've got to admit some of his writing is slightly weird if you don't think about it that way, because think about how much detail he writes just about maybe like Archie and Veronica's sex scenes. Like when they're having sex and he's talking over the top being the narrator, he goes into quite a lot of detail. And if you were Jughead and Archie, Veronica and Betty and all of his friends are real, you wouldn't really be writing about your best friend's sex life, would you? Because that would just be a bit strange. So that's one of the reasons why people may think that all of Riverdale is just in Jughead's head and he is writing it down on paper for other people. But then again, Series 4, the most recent few episodes, might have changed that idea slightly, which means I'm sort of swaying more to the other idea of the fact that maybe the character Jughead inside of Riverdale, so all the characters are real, all of the stuff that has happened is real, and then after the series ends, Jughead writes this book, or in other words, he's been writing it throughout the entire show, and then he finally publishes it at the end. And the reason for that is because of what happened in one of the most recent episodes of Series 4. Jughead has already gone to this boarding school place where he's learning lots of literacy and is writing books, and then one of the professors came in and has told Jughead to write something. He told Jughead to write the perfect murder. Now, if that doesn't sound like it's sort of like referring back to Season 1 about the perfect murder with Jason Blossom, then I don't know what does sound like it. Now, throughout Season 4 already, we found out that Jughead is writing the perfect murder to see if he can carry on this book tradition that a bunch of writers in the past have written about, because there is a book collection of murders and each writer writes around 5 books, then passes it on to the next generation. And that's what Jughead is wanting to do. He's wanting to write this perfect murder so that he can start writing these books. And my whole idea is that the reason why Jughead has been keeping track of all of these stories, has been keeping track of all of his friends' history and all of his history in Riverdale, and the reason why he's been writing it up is because in the future he's hoping to use it as a story idea for a book. And what to start with than the perfect murder. So if he writes his first book and relates it back to Season 1 about Jason Blossom, maybe that's what the perfect murder is going to be about. He's going to write a book about his past, but maybe change some of the characters a little bit so that people don't realise that. He might write a book about Jason Blossom's death, and then that's the first book done. Then, after Season 4, he might write the second book, and that will be about Series 2 and another murderer, in other words, the Black Hood. In the third book, he might write about Series 3, the Gargoyle King, and it will repeat and repeat. So if we look at it from that perspective, then maybe we might have an idea that instead of all of Riverdale being in Jughead's imagination, it's actually Jughead is writing about it, so that in the future he can use his stories that he's had from the past, from his own personal life experiences, and turn them into a fictional murderer book for people to read and enjoy. And that's the reason why I think Jughead is writing out all of these things throughout the entire series, because he's hoping to write it out as a book. Now, what do you guys think? Do you think it could just be a figment of his imagination that all of Riverdale is just made up? Or do you think it could be this new theory, which is the idea that Jughead is writing about his past, but in a fictional way? Let us know in the field section down below. So guys, that is the end of the video. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you have, make sure that you smash that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Tell us in the field section down below what you think of this theory. If you think it could be a entire fictional book and it's all in Jughead's head, or if you think it might be Jughead later on writing about his past, about his perfect murders. Let us know in the field section down below. And if you're wondering about how on earth this could relate to the whole mysterious thing that's happening with Jughead at the end of Season 4, throughout Season 4 it's been teasing lots of weird things, such as that weird fire at the end of Season 3 and the wood scene and stuff about maybe Jughead's dead or maybe not. If you want to know more about that, we've done a video on that about what we think will happen at the end of Series 4. If you want to go and check that out, make sure that you go and click the card, or there'll be a link down below in the description. Thank you so much guys for watching, and I'll see you guys later.